Hi, I'm April Allen.
And I'm Shawna Unger. And today we're just going to spend some time talking through some of the questions that we get asked as it relates to equity and inclusion, particularly in our current environment. And with that, April, I'm curious. Belonging is a topic that we're passionate about, but if you're a CFO, a COO, a C-suite member, why do you care about belonging?
Yeah, that is a question I get a lot. Or asked another way is, how do I make my CEO or CFO care? Mm-hmm. Because right now it's all about the economy. It's economy stupid. We don't care. This doesn't matter. We just need to get butts in seats. We need to make money. It's the bottom line thing. And the reality is, though, without belonging, your most important commodity, which is people, your company, your organization will fail if you don't take care of those folks. And so I think it's important for CEOs to think about the current environment. So when I'm talking to a C-suite member or a CEO or CFO who's a little bit apathetic or a little bit nebulous around the answer around, do I care about belonging? I want them to think about the current state, the current environment that we are currently living in. Mm-hmm. The Surgeon General came out and said, I declare this is a loneliness epidemic, which they said accelerated during the pandemic. So when people are going into organizations, not only are they, not only are they coming in, and a lot of them are lonely, they're trying to also get some connection while they're at work. Mm-hmm. No one wants to go somewhere and feel worse. Mm-hmm. No one wants to be somewhere and don't feel like they belong.
I think, and you and I talk a lot about the fact that there is more diversity in generations, in age span within the workforce than there's ever been in U.S. history. And I think there are different needs. Yeah. And yet at the same time, I know we were talking really recently when I went to business school back in the early 90s, aging myself as a solid Gen Xer. The idea was sort of man as machine and teaching, how to measure productivity, how to measure efficiency, how to go to Japan and learn how to do the Toyota way. Yeah. And there's certainly some truth to that, some good principles within that. But at the end of the day, we know as human beings, we're not machines. No. We know we come as, a fully formed person. We have different things that we may value. We have different things that we may prioritize. But we do want to be seen and heard.
And valued, right? And we know belonging is a fundamental need. Right? Mm-hmm. That's not an optional, nice to have. You need to feel like you belong. And it does look differently generationally. I do believe that. And I know that for a fact. And to your point, with all the diversity within the workforce, right? We have 50% of Gen Z is non-white, 25% identify with the LGBTQ community, more neurodiversity than ever. Go down the line. And so belonging is going to look a little differently, but it is incumbent on the organization to figure out what does that look like for your organization and for your employees. Mm-hmm. It's definitely not an optional nicety. Mm-hmm. It's a must-have.
And given that difference, given, again, we just said, whether it's age, whether it's neurodiversity, whether it's race and ethnicity, whether it's being a member of the queer community or the straight cisgender community, there is so much difference. And so companies needing to build that skill, build that muscle where people do feel safe, they feel a sense of connection, they feel a sense of purpose and belonging in the midst of difference is more important now than ever. Your ability to survive and then thrive as an organization not just now, but into the future, it's incumbent upon you to learn some of these skills, to learn how to create that sense of belonging. I hate it. And again, you and I grew up in college and organization where it was soft skills versus, thinking of these things as business imperatives.
Yeah, and that's what you see as soft skills. But the reality is the best managers or people leaders I ever worked for, they created a sense of belonging. And the people that may have been good at their job technically, but did not have those soft skills, I didn't want to work for them. I was not ingratiated to them. I was not going to go die on a hill for them. I was like, okay, how do I get away from them? And that's how most people feel. And so it's interesting to me when we don't value that, and we just don't look at people holistically. I mean, things that we do know are everyone's diverse. I mean, we are living in a diverse world. We know that a lot of people are experiencing loneliness, and we know that people need to feel like they have a sense of belonging. So if we look at those three factors, we see that you must address that with your people strategies.
Why do you think, given that on one hand, we know that belonging is an innate human need. We all know what it feels like when we're on the outside.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so hard for companies to engage in this or to engage with difference?
Difference be hard. As you like to say, hashtag difference be hard. And we see that, right? Hashtag difference be hard. Like, difference is hard. It's beautiful.
It's hard for you and I.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. That's the reality. People wonder, like, how do y'all, how does that work, right? I'm a Black woman. I am clearly... Shocking. I'm a Black woman. I'm married with 11 and 8-year-old. I'm tired all the time. And I come from a certain background and family, and you don't have that lived experience. But we know that even in the differences we share, and dare I say disagreements we have, on how we may view life, or is that fair, how we view life? Sometimes, yeah. I would say that's fair. It's worth it because what we've gained is a sense of belonging from each other that few will ever experience.
Yeah, I think it is hard. And that's, I think, the funny thing. After being in corporate America, working as an HR executive and leader for over 20 years, as passionate as I am around some of these topics, pragmatically, at the end of the day, in my work hat, in that work life, there was, a push at times to kind of make things vanilla so that it was easier to administer. It was more efficient.
But everyone's not vanilla.
Everybody is not vanilla.
And everyone can't jump into the vanilla pool. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. People, and you get your best creative ideas, your best innovations when people are not vanilla and they can figure out how to work together.
Right.
Right. And that's the thing. That's what we say diversity isn't a goal, it's a fact. The fact is none of us are the same, even if we look the same. And so... yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, that's the reality. It's hard. It's easier to go into a little group or fit a mold of people, vanilla for me, chocolate, but and try to have a little mold of people say, this fits, this works, this is easier, right? They understand me. They're not, as a DEI practitioner and being in this space for 20 years, and you see people say, oh my gosh, this is just so hard because I didn't mean that. Or I had to rethink about how I said that. I mean, we've had stuff. Remember when you called me precious cargo?
I did call you precious
and then
cargo.
You came back and said, wait a minute. Knowing, because you were you're a history buff, and that was one of your focuses in school. You're like, wait a minute. That also could be seen as a derogatory. as somebody whose family came through slavery. And that's what we were called, cargo. And you recognizing that going, oh, oops. And I was like, yeah, all good. Right. Which leads me to actually get a sense of belonging. The people that may not be in the majority space have to also have some grace. I call it grace space, safe space.
Yeah, I think there's probably a misnomer or an impulse right now, particularly societally, with social media or cancel culture, or where we do have this tendency to drift into our tribes, whether in our personal life or whether at work, and create sort of a contrived sense of safety or fitting in. Everybody fits here, because you're less likely to step in it or offend or move into something that's going to be uncomfortable.
But you can't be close without friction.
Very true.
So you have to have friction to be close, right? And so there has to be friction to create fire.
You and I believe that's true, but I'm not sure that everybody who's listening would automatically.
Because we don't want friction. I mean, we are friction adverse, especially depending on what your cultural leanings are. Being in the Pacific Northwest, people are like, no, some people call it Pacific Northwest polite. Other of us call it passive aggressive. And they don't want friction. It's like, nope, I just kind of want to be nice and not have to deal with that tough stuff and rough stuff. But I think that one misnomer is that if you disagree, you can't disagree. You have to make each other agree. You don't.
And that's where I think there is a business, the business case for this remains. Deloitte, Boston Scientific, McKinsey and Company, everybody is still coming back to say diverse organizations that have inclusion and belonging present perform better. They perform better financially in market share, in net promoter score, in, employees' willingness to stay and retention. And so the business case just continues to be there. And yet it is difficult. And I think trying to create that context where that difficulty or that friction is set in context as a good thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Right.
This is going to happen. And I mean, I know we try to help organizations with putting those plans in place of encouraging healthy disagreement so that someone doesn't feel excluded or all of a sudden they don't fit because they're not fitting the majority opinion, regardless of identity. You really can't perform at your highest if you don't have that in the room.
Right. And a context for it, that it's not just, I think so many of us think of conflict inherently as bad versus an opportunity for innovation, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to build trust. And I know trust is kind of a culturally grounded word. It may look different for me than it does for you or for, first generation immigrant, but it is an opportunity to expand the potential of the organization. So, if you and I did, 100 sit-ups, some burpees, we planked for 5 minutes, our core would feel uncomfortable. It would feel sore, but we'd have a context of this is.
But if I kept that going, I'm sorry, I'd be snatched. I just have to say that right now. If I kept that going, but no, you're right. It would create a context of.
I'm just saying that exercise, that discomfort would be within the context of being worth it because we're strengthening our core. Yeah. If I had that same experience just randomly while I was going to bed, I would be worried. I'd be thinking, why is my core hurting.
Yeah.
So the discomfort within context can either be good, generative, without context, or if we just think, absolutely no pain, we understand there's going to be no gain. Yeah. So I'm curious. We're in the midst of Black History Month in February, coming into Women's History Month. If I'm an organization and in the current climate, what do you recommend as a Black woman? What are your thoughts about that, or the other months that signify specific groups or celebrations?
Black History Month for me, to be honest, is complicated, right? It is one where I want to celebrate the accomplishments of the progression of the Black experience, the momentum, the progress that has been made. But at the same time, and I'm being thoughtful here but at the same time, especially in this current climate, there's some grief. There's some grief. When I say this current climate, I don't mean political climate necessarily, meaning that you see the active efforts of people trying to stop stories from being told that are true life stories and their lived experience and their lived experience that was in part because of U.S. laws, U.S. spoken and unspoken codes. And so the dismantling of trying to share people's stories, that grieves me, that hurts me. Those stories give me hope as a Black person. Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, as a kid, gave me hope. So I look at that and it saddens me. That part saddens me, but I also can look at it and reflect on all the progress that has been made. I look at, me, I came from, my great-great-grandfather was a slave, and I think about, my grandparents, they were in slavery and they sharecropped. And then, I think about that history and those stories that have been told to me and passed down. My mother went to segregated schools in the South. And which is why she was hell-bent on me being educated, because she wasn't afforded those opportunities. And so when people try to act like, oh, that's so far removed, and why are we still talking about this? Because that impacts me to this day. It impacts how I view education. It impacts how I see the world, how I value the world. But I think it's just, I think with Black History Month, I think if organizations could just, shy away from performative measures. That's what I mean by performative measures. Yeah. Okay, we're going to have, like you said, we're going to bring in this Black history speaker to talk about allyship. Okay, but you're not looking at your own data and see. Right. You actually don't want to look at your own data and see the turnover numbers and segment them out by race.
Right.
And then once you see that, which I've seen over and over with organizations, let's act like this isn't happening. Let's act like this is not a real experience, because either overwhelm or shame or fear.
Yeah.
So for me, it's being intentional about looking at your Black employees and seeing not just recruiting, because when organizations are like, we're out here recruiting, yada, yada, I'm like, okay, but if nobody wants to stay here,
right,
you guys are wasting your time. Because they don't want to stay here because the environment, but people don't want to acknowledge that. And like I've told other people, I said, I have a friend who has said, well, I don't know what's going on here. And I said, it's one thing when you have some outliers that are having a bad experience. But when you see your data, or HR is getting complaints from a whole host of people,
Right.
everyone's not lying. Everyone's not the problem. So that means you have a systemic problem that you need to address. You know, when I look at what does that look like to not be performative during these cultural moments, is really making a commitment to protect and honor the employees that you do have and honor their inherent dignity.
Yeah.
I will say this, it requires grace
Yes.
that we don't talk about to have a diverse democracy. And so when I have traveled overseas or I've lived overseas and taught and all that, one of the things they say is, oh my gosh, the beauty of America is so diverse. And to hear so many people think right now, that's our weakness and not our strength. That's troubling.
Yeah, I think you're really hitting on, you continue to have those events, but I think part of what we're seeing right now in some of the national criticism or pulling away from DEI is fair in that have the actions or lack thereof that organizations have taken really been effective? Have they moved the dial both for maybe historically marginalized groups, whether it's LGBTQ or, lesser represented race, ethnicity? And have we made those advances? Certainly a lot of companies made anti-racist commitments and statements following the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. But was that really felt and experienced within the organization? And I think you and I talk a lot about, and the approach that we take is systems work as designed.
Yep.
And so if you say that you value, we see in company values respect, we may see things around inclusive leadership. And yet over and over, there's this sort of scratch of the head of, gosh, I don't know why there is a higher turnover rate of racially diverse,
or even
like
generationally.
like it's magically happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're getting a certain outcome, it's because that is what is being created in the organization, whether it's hard to look at or not. But for us not to, it's just like, I don't want to look at the scale. Look, I'd love to believe I'm in the same way as I was in my 20s. And that ship has sailed. And, but if I don't take a look at my weight, my cholesterol, all these things that happen as you start getting older that I could not care less about, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, I can't address it.
Right.
I can't get better. I can't adapt to where the here and now.
Right.
Sometimes organizations are not with the program, but there are individuals who are. And so I always think about sponsorship. A lot of times, I think what's so heartbreaking to me as a Black person that worked in DEI and works in DEI, but worked in big organizations, you hear people come in and say, Black folks that are qualified candidates. I see this, even some of the top, they're one level from maybe C-suite or senior leadership. And because they may not fit the mold, they're getting higher scrutiny, and they are trying to break down any barrier all by themselves. But you really need sponsorship. You really need somebody at that C-suite level or that senior executive level to say, no, this person can do the job. This person, I believe in them. This person, I want to, give them that project. I want them to come in and present. You need sponsorship. That's what I have found. One of the greatest strengths I can have is somebody who will sponsor me, whether we want to admit it or not. Some of us we kind of balk at that, like, oh, I don't need sponsorship, or like that feels too, that's lacking autonomy. Like, I'm dependent on somebody. I'm not going to be dependent on someone, but
We've all benefited by
Yeah.
somebody looking out for us.
Yeah, you just need someone to look out for you.
I guess the question I would have, and we see it right now all over, organizational media, sort of that question of, is DEI dead? And if you had, 3 things to say relative to that question that's, hanging in folks' minds, should this be invested in, or is it over? Did DEI sort of, have its moment in the limelight and it's time to move on?
We like shiny objects, right? So we like new words, new phrases. Is DEI dead? No, it's not dead, because DEI is just a name or an acronym. But the facts are, the world is diverse.
Yeah.
This is the most diverse workforce in history, 4 generations in the workforce. So it can't be dead because it exists. And people still need to feel included. And they're going to come at, what does inclusion look like? You're going to have to address that from different angles. You can have those principles in place, but what does that look like for your organization, your team? I'll ask you, is DEI dead?
Yeah, for the same reasons, I would say no. And I would, to those that probably, there are some that feel uncomfortable talking about all this difference hasn't helped. I would point back to some of your earlier comments on belonging. Belonging itself is a universal need, and it's really about ensuring that your whole workforce does feel respected, does feel a sense of protection and value.
What would you tell, and I know we're ending, but I would say, what would you tell?
Another trip around the
Yeah,
line.
well, because you've asked because you're caring, which I appreciate. How do you overcome those barriers in an organization that is just kind of like, this is how things are done? We want to protect against lawsuits. We need to just keep things moving. Do your investigation. This doesn't rise to the level of legal liability. How do you overcome that mentality and that expectation?
Yeah, I really see this work and feel called to this work because I do see the dignity of human beings. And you and I shared that. And this work makes good business sense. At the end of the day, we know that right now we had the Great Resignation, and then the pendulum swung, and now it's the Great Stay. And companies are just banking on the fact that their turnover rates are low because people, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
And inflation is off the chain, even though the economy is kind of bouncing back. But investing in this, investing in creating an environment where you can get diverse candidates, diverse thought, diverse ways of saying things to innovate and come together with a shared sense of purpose, a shared sense of safety and belonging, not because we fit, not because we're all these monolithic pieces, but that we bring something different to the table. It creates competitive advantage for you. It creates a better sense of commitment to the organization that will help your risk management. It will help some of those complaints that come forward if you and I can sit down and talk about our differences, whether we're 2 white cisgender women, whether we are racially, ethnically different, whether one of us is from the queer community and one is, heterosexually married with 3 kids. That ability to come together, work through difference, makes companies stronger. I understand it's scary, and yet I would say to that HR executive that just feels like this is not worth it, it may be uncomfortable, but it absolutely is worth it in the end. Your staff will be better, and as a result, you as an organization will be better.
I think that's good. And thank you for mentioning the Great Stay. Because people are banking on that Great Stay and that people will stay, but it's just like once they have a chance to go somewhere else, just like a bad relationship, you're gone. So I think organizations have to weigh that. But yeah, well, thank you for your time today. I love talking to you. And I appreciate your partnership.
Yeah. Till our next conversation.
Bye.